These are stories where love meets betrayal. Stories that make you see life a little differently.
I didn't plan to tell this story tonight, but sometimes the rain brings back memories you spend years trying to forget, and sometimes those memories insist on being heard. My name is Claire, and this is the night my life broke quietly, without shouting, without chaos, just the soft, cold truth slipping between the cracks of the life I thought I had. I used to believe betrayal always came with a warning sign, a strange text message, a shift in body language, the kind of intuition women whisper about saying, "Trust your gut." My gut never warned me. Or maybe it did, and I just refused to listen. It began on a Thursday night, a night that looked just like any other, except it wasn't. The rain had been falling since morning, slow and steady, tapping against the windows in a rhythm that felt almost comforting. Daniel had left for work earlier than usual, said he had a meeting, something urgent. I didn't question it. Why would I? I trusted him, blindly, completely. I spent most of the day working from home, editing reports, answering emails, sipping lukewarm coffee that I kept forgetting to finish. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Funny how silence can make you hear things you normally ignore. Around 7 p.m., Daniel texted me. A simple message. Working late, don't wait for me. No heart emoji. No love you. Just cold words from a man who used to write paragraphs when we first met. I remember staring at that message longer than necessary. Not because I felt something was wrong, but because something inside me finally woke up. I made dinner for one. Pasta with garlic and basil, the kind we used to cook together before life turned us into strangers living under the same roof. I ate mechanically, barely tasting anything. The rain outside growing heavier, as if the sky was trying to speak louder. After dinner, I opened my laptop to watch something mindless, anything to make the evening pass faster. But then I heard it, a vibration, a subtle buzz from Daniel's phone, left on the shelf near the entryway. He never forgot his phone. Never. I walked toward it slowly, almost cautiously, as if approaching something dangerous. The screen was still glowing when I picked it up, and a name I didn't recognize danced on the display. Olivia. Just 7 letters, but they sliced through me like a blade. A part of me froze. Another part kept whispering, "Don't jump to conclusions. Don't be that woman. Don't ruin everything for nothing." But curiosity can be louder than reason, especially when mixed with fear. I unlocked his phone. Yes, I knew his passcode. He once told me it was a sign of trust. Now I see it for what it was. A doorway he never thought I'd walk through. The first message was recent. "I miss you. When can I see you again?" My breath caught in my throat. My fingers trembled. And the room suddenly felt smaller, tighter, darker. I scrolled up, and the truth unfolded slowly, painfully, like a wound that refuses to close. Weeks of messages, photos, plans made behind my back, words he never said to me anymore, now handed to someone else with ease and excitement. He'd been seeing her for nearly 2 months. 2 months of lies. 2 months of me kissing him goodnight without knowing another woman's lipstick had touched the same skin.
2 months of me believing we were just busy, just stressed, just tired. I don't remember when the tears started. One moment I was reading, the next my vision blurred and a quiet sob escaped me. A sound so small yet so full of grief. I set the phone down, carefully, gently, the way you would place something fragile. Though what was fragile was no longer the phone. It was me. I walked to the living room window and stared outside. The rain had grown fierce, tapping against the glass like impatient fingers. Some people say rain is cleansing, but that night it felt more like judgment. For a long time I stood there, listening to the storm, trying to understand how the man I loved could create such a hurricane inside me without even being in the room. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to call him. Part of me wanted to pack my things and disappear without explanation. But I did none of that. Instead, I waited. Hours passed. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, counting down to the moment my life would shift for good. At 11:46 p.m., the front door finally opened. Daniel stepped inside, shaking off the rain, dropping his keys onto the table like he always did. He didn't notice the tension at first. He didn't notice my swollen eyes or the silence that had weight to it. "Hey," he said casually, "you're still awake?" I didn't speak, just watched him as he took off his coat. He looked tired, stressed, but not guilty. Not like a man living a double life. "Everything okay?" he asked, finally sensing something was wrong. I handed him his phone. No words, just the phone. He stared at it, then at me. And in that split second, his expression shifted, not to shock, not to fear, but to resignation. He knew. "Claire, it's not what you think," he began. I laughed, a bitter, broken sound I didn't recognize. "Really?" I said softly. "Then please, tell me what I'm thinking." He opened his mouth, then closed it. A man with no story left to sell. "How long?" I asked. He hesitated. And hesitation is just another word for the truth you don't want to say. 2 months, he admitted. 2 months. Hearing him say it hurt more than reading it. "Do you love her?" I asked. His silence was enough. I felt something inside me crumble. Not because he chose her, but because he had already chosen, long before I knew. I walked past him slowly and sat on the edge of the couch. My hands were cold, my breath shaky, but my voice was steady when I spoke again. "Why, Daniel?" He rubbed his face with both hands, leaning back against the wall. "I don't know," he said quietly. "I didn't plan it. I just felt seen again. I felt alive." Alive. What a cruel word. "And with me?" I whispered. "What did you feel with me?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Sometimes silence is the clearest confession. I stood up, feeling strangely calm, like the eye of a storm that had finally settled. "I'm leaving tonight," I said softly. He looked up sharply. "Claire, wait." "No," I interrupted. "You already chose. I'm just accepting it. I walked to the bedroom and grabbed a small suitcase, the one I used for weekend trips, back when we still took them. I packed quietly, efficiently, not because I wasn't hurting, but because the pain had become too heavy to scream. When I stepped back into the hallway, Daniel looked lost, unsure, almost afraid. "Please," he whispered, "don't go like this." I met his eyes, searching for the man I once knew. But all I saw was a stranger who wore my husband's face. "I trusted you," I said, "with everything, and you broke something you can't fix." He reached out as if to touch my arm, but I stepped back. "I'm not the woman you get to touch anymore," I said quietly. The rain outside roared, as if echoing the truth. I walked toward the door, opened it, felt the cold night air brush against my skin. "Goodbye, Daniel," I whispered. And then I stepped outside. The rain hit my face instantly, cold, sharp, almost cleansing. For the first time that night, I felt like I could breathe again. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what tomorrow would look like. But I knew one thing. I was done loving a man who only remembered he was alive when he broke someone else's heart. Sometimes betrayal doesn't destroy you. Sometimes it sets you free. And that night, walking alone under the storm, I finally felt free. The rain followed me all the way down the street, cold drops running along my cheeks, mixing with the tears I didn't want to admit were still falling. The night air tasted different, sharper, cleaner, like the world had shifted into a version I wasn't ready for, yet somehow needed. I walked without a destination, just the sound of water hitting pavement, just the rhythm of my boots splashing through puddles, just the echo of the last words I had spoken inside the home that no longer felt like mine. I kept replaying everything in my head, his silence, his hesitation, the way he didn't even try to lie convincingly, the way he didn't run after me. Strange, isn't it? How silence can hurt more than the cruelest truth. I don't know how long I walked. Minutes, maybe hours. Or maybe grief bends time until minutes feel like days and hours feel like nothing. Eventually, I reached the edge of town where the street lights grew dimmer, where homes were spaced farther apart, where the rain felt louder because the world was quieter. I stopped near a small park, the one Daniel and I used to visit when we first moved in together, back when life felt simple, when love felt untouchable, back when I believed in forever. There was an old wooden bench under a dying oak tree. I sat down, letting the rain soak through my clothes. I didn't care. The cold felt honest in a way that comfort never could. For a long moment, I just listened. The storm, my heartbeat, the steady hum of a world continuing, unaware that mine had split open. I pulled out my phone, not to call anyone, just to look at the time. 1:12 a.m. Funny, midnight heartbreaks always feel more cinematic, but real pain rarely kicks the clock. I stared at the screen, wondering who I could call at that hour. My sister? No, she'd panic. My best friend? she'd drive across town instantly, and I wasn't ready to explain everything. Not yet. My mother? Absolutely not. She'd turn this into stories about my poor judgment, just like your father, and I didn't have the strength for that. So I sat alone, in the rain, with a suitcase and a broken heart. After a while, I noticed a small glow across the street. A tiny cafe, still open despite the storm. Its neon sign flickered a warm, soft orange. Almost inviting. Almost comforting. I stood up slowly, my legs stiff from sitting in the cold, and crossed the street. When I stepped inside, a wave of warm air wrapped around me. The smell of coffee, cinnamon, and something sweet filled the room. The sound of rain softened behind the glass. The place was nearly empty. Just a young barista wiping down the counter and an older man reading a newspaper near the corner window. The barista looked up when he saw me. "Rough night?" he asked gently. I forced a small smile. "You could say that." "Want something warm?" "Yes, please." "What would you like?" "Anything hot, anything sweet." He nodded and began preparing something without asking further questions, a kindness I didn't know I needed. I chose a small table near the back and set my suitcase beside my chair. My fingers were trembling when I wrapped them around the warm ceramic mug he handed me. "On the house," he said quietly. I blinked. "Really?" He shrugged. Rain has a way of dragging heavy stories into places like this. Consider it a small mercy. I wanted to thank him, but the words stuck in my throat. I sipped the drink, a creamy mix of hot chocolate and coffee, rich and soothing. For the first time since everything shattered, I felt my body relax just a little. As I sat there, watching the rain streak across the windows, a strange thought slipped into my mind. Was this the moment my new life began? Not in a dramatic, cinematic way, not with a sudden revelation, but with a quiet acknowledgement that the life I had was now gone, and the life ahead was unwritten. I stayed in the cafe for almost an hour, letting myself breathe, letting myself fall apart in tiny, manageable pieces instead of one catastrophic collapse. Around 2 a.m., the older man by the window folded his newspaper and stood up. As he put on his coat, he gave me a soft, knowing smile. "Whichever storm you're weathering," he said gently, "it won't last forever. They never do." I didn't know him. He didn't know me. But those words settled somewhere deep inside me, in a place still warm, despite everything. After he left, the barista approached again. "We're closing soon," he said, "but you're welcome to stay as long as you need." I appreciated the kindness, but I knew I couldn't stay there forever. Eventually, the world demands motion. I stood up, grabbed my suitcase, and stepped back into the rain. It had softened now, still steady, still persistent, but gentler. Almost like the storm had exhausted itself, crying with me. I pulled out my phone again. This time, I dialed someone. Not family, not a friend. I called myself a taxi to a hotel across town. Small, quiet, and far enough from home that I wouldn't feel the walls closing in. When the car arrived, the driver glanced at me through the rearview mirror as I settled into the seat. "Long night?" I nodded. "Something like that. You'll get through it."
he said softly. People kept telling me that tonight. Maybe the universe was trying to reassure me, or maybe it knew I wouldn't believe it unless I heard it 100 times.
When we reached the hotel, I checked in quickly. The receptionist didn't ask questions. Another kindness. The room was simple. A bed, a desk, a window overlooking the city lights blurred by rain. I dropped my suitcase by the door and fell onto the bed. Clothes still damp, hair still wet. Exhaustion hit me all at once. Not just physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. I stared at the ceiling, thinking about everything and nothing at the same time. How did I get here? How did the man I loved become the man who broke me? How did our future dissolve into a stranger's text messages and late-night lies? I turned onto my side, pulled the blankets around me, and closed my eyes.
But sleep didn't come easily. Instead, memories drifted in, slowly, painfully, uninvited. The first time I met Daniel, our first kiss, our first trip together, the night we moved into our home, laughing, exhausted, hopeful. All the little promises, all the whispered plans, all the moments I thought were real. And the moment everything changed, without me even knowing it.
Eventually, exhaustion overpowered grief, and sleep pulled me under. It wasn't restful. It wasn't peaceful. But it was sleep. I woke up hours later to pale morning light filtering through the curtains. The rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean, shining faintly under a gray sky. My body felt heavy, but my mind was clearer. Not healed, not okay, but clearer. I took a long shower, letting the hot water warm my frozen skin. At one point, I pressed my forehead against the tiled wall and cried, quietly, steadily, letting everything trapped inside me finally spill out. After the shower, I wrapped myself in a hotel towel and stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My eyes were swollen, my face pale, my hair messy and damp. But I saw something else too. Something I hadn't seen in years. A woman who had survived the worst night of her life and was still standing. Broken, bruised, but standing. I dressed slowly, savoring the small comfort of clean, dry clothes. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my phone. There were 6 missed calls from Daniel. 3 messages, none of which I opened. I stared at his name on the screen and felt nothing. Just emptiness where love used to live. I blocked his number, not out of anger, out of necessity. Then I blocked him on email, on social media, everywhere. I needed space. I needed time. I needed myself back. For the next hour, I sat quietly in the hotel room, sipping tea from a paper cup, staring out at the wet streets below. People walked hurriedly, clutching umbrellas. Cars splashed through puddles. Life moved on, and so would I. But I knew one thing for certain. I was not going back. Not to that house, not to that man, not to the version of myself who ignored her own instincts. I booked the room for 3 more nights, just enough time to figure out my next steps. Then, I called my sister. When she answered and heard my voice, she immediately knew something was wrong.
"What happened?" she asked gently. "I left Daniel," I said quietly. Silence, then a soft, trembling breath. "Where are you?" "I'm safe," I said. "I'm at a hotel. I'm coming to you." she replied instantly. "You don't have to." "Claire," she said firmly, "you don't get to push me away right now." For the first time since the night before, I felt a small smile lift the corner of my mouth. Within an hour, she arrived, hair messy, coat thrown over pajamas, eyes filled with worry and love. When she saw me, she didn't ask questions. She didn't demand explanations. She just wrapped her arms around me and held on. And that's when I finally broke completely. The kind of cry that comes from deep inside, from a place you didn't even know existed, from the parts of you that have been silently hurting for far too long. She held me the whole time. No judgment, no interruptions. Just love. When the storm inside me finally calmed, she pulled back and wiped a strand of hair from my face. "Whatever he did," she said softly, "you're not facing this alone." For the first time, I believed her. We spent the morning talking, slowly, gently, carefully, like stitching a wound one thread at a time.
I told her everything. The messages, the lies, the moment I walked out, the cafe, the hotel, the way it all felt unreal. She listened without interrupting, without saying, "I told you so," without blaming me for missing the signs. When I finished, she wrapped her hands around mine and said, "You did the right thing." Leaving was the hardest choice and the bravest. Hearing that from someone else, someone who loved me, someone who knew me, it mattered more than I expected. We spent the rest of the day planning next steps. I needed to retrieve my personal things, but with her by my side. I needed to speak with a lawyer, not for revenge, but for clarity. I needed to decide where I would live, maybe with her for a while, until I found something else. I needed to rebuild, piece by piece. But most of all, I needed to heal. When evening came, she insisted I stay with her instead of returning to the hotel. I agreed, not because I couldn't be alone, but because I finally understood that strength doesn't always mean solitude. On the drive to her place, the sky began to darken again. Clouds gathered overhead. The first few drops of rain tapped against the windshield. I leaned my head against the window, watched the wet streets blur into soft shapes, listened to the quiet hum of the car engine. Rain again, of course. It felt symbolic somehow, like the world was washing the last remnants of yesterday away. When we arrived at her house, she helped me carry my suitcase inside. She made tea, found me clean clothes, lit candles that smelled like vanilla and cedarwood. Small comforts, small kindnesses. I sat on her couch, wrapped in a soft blanket, staring at the flickering light of the candles. The storm outside grew stronger, wind howling, rain hitting the windows in steady waves. But inside was warm, safe, quiet. For the first time since it all happened, I felt peace. A fragile peace, a trembling peace, but peace nonetheless. I closed my eyes, listened to the rain, and whispered to myself, "You survived." I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I didn't know how long the healing would take. I didn't know when the pain would finally loosen its grip on my heart. But I knew this. I had left the man who betrayed me. I had chosen myself.
And even though the road ahead was uncertain, it was mine. And sometimes freedom begins with a storm.
Sometimes pain doesn't come from enemies, but from the ones we trusted the most. Maybe that's how life teaches us to see the truth. Could you forgive such a betrayal? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. More stories are coming, stories that will touch your heart.